Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Welcome back. Another fun show for all of you today. It is called Agent Mindset Mastery. Crush negative thinking and succeed at the highest levels. Especially good information for all of you who are getting ready to crush it in 2025. So the podcast today is, of course, sponsored by Premier Coaching. And Premier Coaching is our premier coaching program, thus the name. And Premier Coaching 2.0 is about to be launched, which will include Ethical Real Estate Professional. And if you aren't aware of what Ethical Real Estate Professional is, get ready to hear about us talking about it a lot starting in about 2 weeks. It is going to change the real estate industry. It's going to be a movement of, like-minded agents who are really truly focused on what their highest, truest purpose on this planet is, which is being of service to other people. And they're going to have the designation and the credentials to prove it. So a little sneak peek for you. Go over to ethicalrealestateprofessional.com and check it out. And you can also go to, if you just go to Google, frankly, and you put in ethical real estate, you will find our website is in the #1 position and through SEO, and frankly, because it's a great website, we did everything correctly when building it. That is where all members of Premier Coaching will be listed, because when you join Premier Coaching, you're also going to automatically earn the Ethical Real Estate Professional designation, which again, we feel is going to give you a really huge advantage in your marketplace. So what do you do now? Go to premiercoaching.com, because that's how you will be rewarded or awarded the Ethical Real Estate Professional designation when you become a Premier Coaching client, and go ahead and enroll. You'll be automatically upgraded to Premier Coaching 2.0, which includes EREP, that's Ethical Real Estate Professional, probably in about, like I said, 2 weeks. So don't worry about joining now, just go ahead and get it done. And again, it's premiercoaching.com, or you can just click the link below in today's show description and join right away. And you can join right away today for free. So go ahead and do that, premiercoaching.com.
All right, so again, we're talking about how to master your mind and crush negativity so you can succeed. Did you know that the average person has over 6,000 thoughts a day, and many of them are repetitive and negative? Imagine the freedom of taking control of your mental dialogue. So in today's episode, we're going to explore 4 powerful strategies to stop that negative thinking and build a positive, growth-focused mindset, starting with awareness and reflection. And that means recognizing and labeling those negative thoughts. So the first thing is awareness. You got to catch it when it happens, and that can be a big challenge sometimes, right?
But let's stop there, Julie, because that's a really good point. There is, it's funny, I just had this visualization as I was thinking of what to say to help these guys understand the point that you just made. And like when you walk into Barnes & Noble, and by the way, did you hear that Barnes & Noble is having a bit of a renaissance?
No, that's good.
It is good.
We'll talk about that on tomorrow's Everything Goes show, too.
Right. So
cool.
You walk into Barnes & Noble looking for our book, Harris Rules. You'll find it, but you could tell Barnes & Noble doesn't really know where to put it, because it's usually in the real estate section. Books written specifically for real estate agents. There's maybe like only 4 or 5 of them, really, that Barnes & Noble carries. And where our book is almost always by, The One Thing or The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, the books that Gary Keller wrote. But on the other side, or usually sometimes on the same side of where you'll find our books, you will also then find literally hundreds of mindset books. Books written about, all the things that you guys probably, a lot of you are going to be aware of through like Tony Robbins and things like that. And those books are great, and they help a lot of people, obviously, or a lot of people wouldn't be buying those books, and there wouldn't be that many books getting published. But what's interesting to me, and what should hopefully be interesting to you, is when you realize, again, that you can't control your thoughts that pop into your mind. And all those books want you to believe that you can, and you can't. And there's no, and attempting to control the thoughts that pop into your mind is an exercise in futility, which will ultimately make you feel like a failure. So if you've been on the mindset movement bandwagon, since you can remember, and you're yet to master your mindset, give up on it, because the reality of it is that the thoughts that pop around in your brain don't deserve your attention. And that's what those books oftentimes will try to get you to do, is they want you to, think about why you thought that way. Where did that thought come from? And sort of
ruminate upon that for a while,
exactly. Right? And then what happens is you go through all these, levels of mental masturbation, basically, to discover that, hey, guess what? I have no idea where this freaking negative thought came from. It could have just been some rando, doesn't matter thought that I shouldn't have given any attention to at all in the first place. But what happens is people get addicted to all this sort of self-prescribed, psychology, and they read more of these books, and then they go to the conventions, they go to the, all the things, and then they've lost years of their lives. Whereas if they just realize that you can't really control where the thoughts come from, the negative thoughts, you can't really control that, don't even try. But once, and Julie said this, once you have a negative thought and you are able to see it, the key is not to think about it or let it germinate and start to flourish in your brain and in your soul. The key is just to, I am having a negative thought, notice the negative thought, don't think about the negative thought. Don't think where it came from, don't think about what comes next, don't think if it's true or if it's false or any of the other things. Just once you notice the negative thought, it loses its hold over you.
I think of it like a catch and release for a fish, right?
Yeah.
You catch it, you catch the fish, you go, oh, that's an interesting fish. Maybe I label that's this kind of fish, but then I release it. So the key here is to catch it early before you get into that negative rumination about it. So pay attention when you're caught in that cycle and label that thought, I've caught a negative thought, I see that, and then decide you're going to change the pattern. Negative thoughts don't improve with recycling. So there's a quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn who said, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. It's kind of like that. So an action step for you would be journaling. That can help identify the recurring negative patterns. Keep a small notebook handy, keep a legal pad, jot down those thoughts and patterns as they arrive, because sometimes just getting them out of your head and onto the page will break you free of the thought hamster wheel.
Now, a couple thoughts on that. First
Sure.
of all, a lot of times if you do the journaling suggestion that Julie just made, you will realize that you're having the same negative thoughts during the same time of day almost every single day. Now, why is that? Who cares? Weren't you listening a second ago? So you have no idea why. Don't worry about why. But here's what you can do. Start by purging the opportunity for those negative thoughts to even basically seed in your mind by having a media-free life. And by that I mean literally cut out all forms of media. Do not watch MSNBC, CNBC, or even Fox News. Do not listen to the things that maybe you've been listening to. And in some cases, you maybe want to minimize the impact that some people might be having on you that are helping you, or they're essentially holding you down and filling your mind full of sort of these dreadful type thinking. So again, the easy button, if there is such a thing, is to literally hit the media-free life button and completely purge all forms of media except for our podcast, obviously.
Of course.
and then you will find when you do that, if you actually have, go media free, you will find that you actually go through almost stages of, what's it called?
Like the recovery stages, kind of, what is that?
Not recovery, but you go through, like if you get off caffeine, what's it called?
Yeah, that'll hit me in a second. I need more caffeine.
Yeah, we need more caffeine. Why would you ever get off caffeine? That was a bad example. Yeah, but a withdrawal. So you're going to go through stages of withdrawal. You're going to actually go through, when you go media free, and your whole life has been structured around checking the Facebook news feed, checking Instagram, essentially watching the news, looking for inputs from Twitter and all this crap. Okay, as soon as you purge all that from your life, you will absolutely go through withdrawal. You're going to feel this anxiety, this overwhelming sense of almost,
well, there's
fear.
a void because you took something out of there.
Exactly. And so what's going to happen if you are able to maintain that level of anxiety, and it'll start to dissipate and won't be so powerful, just as if you were deciding to get off caffeine or something, right? It's the stages of withdrawal. It's the exact same process. And if you're stuck in a real negative mental, emotional cycle right now, I promise you, if you start with going media free, do it for a day, hell, do it for half a day. Do it for a morning, then make it a whole day, and then go 2 days, then 3 days, then 4 days, and anticipate the anxiety. Maybe offset that with doing some exercising or listening to music. And again, music can be full of anxiety-ridden things too. So make sure you're not essentially replacing one bad for your mental health thing with another, right? But you have to really be critical. If you're stuck in a negative spiral with your thinking and your feelings and your perspective on life, it is almost certainly because you're reinforcing that negative spiral with all these sorts of external, negative thought-inducing forms of media. So start with a purging of it, and then allow yourself to go through the anxiety feelings that are normal when you're coming off anything. And then what you'll discover is that over maybe a week or 2 weeks, your brain will be you'll have a sense of relief. And I don't mean this in a weird sort of hippie way. but literally things will smell better, look better. Your relationships will be better. People that maybe have triggered you in the past won't trigger you anymore because you've actually removed that sort of those external, call them evil influences from your life. And now what's happening is nature abhors a vacuum, and so new things are going to start entering into your life. That's when you start rediscovering that you are a blessed person on a blessed planet during a blessed time, and you start rediscovering what your highest and truest purpose on this planet is, which is being of service to other people. In other words, you are more in alignment with your soul. But for many of you who are stuck in these really, forceful downward spirals, you're gonna have to pull the plug on external media and things of that nature, and it's gonna save your life. It'll really save your potential at the very least. And don't be surprised if that means you're gonna have to probably shed some friends too that are also just essentially reinforcing your negative thinking in your unproductive life.
Well, but all of that goes back to the original point, which is to identify it, isolate it, and then take a look at it for what it is and release it back into the wild. When you were talking about not getting stuck in the negative input, that's leaving space for you to be present, and then you can appreciate all of the things that are around you.
But you can't if you're constantly in this sense of, right, you guys have seen people and read about people who had normal, healthy lives, and maybe you even knew some of these people. Hell, maybe it's even you. And then all of a sudden, it's like 5 years later, it's not the same person. They look different. They look haggard, right? They look, they
got stuck.
They're a shadow of themselves. They got stuck, exactly. And the negative thoughts that compounded, and it became health problems. It became relationship problems, financial problems. So go back to the original point that Julie made. It's not your job to figure out where it came from. It's your job to identify it. Just that's the extent of it. Once you identify it, what's going to happen is you actually stop that thought in its tracks. And the next thing after that, now that you've realized you can actually stop it, you've got to stop all the sources that have been creating that sort of negative thinking in your mind. And the best way to do that, the quickest way to do it, is start to eliminate things from your life, starting with being media free.
Very well said. So let's get into practical and tactical. Certainly being media free is a great start to create some space. So now what are some tools? Focusing on gratitude. You mentioned that a second ago. So part 2 is practical tools. Shift your mindset by listing things that you are grateful for. Gratitude helps to redirect focus from problems to positives. A quote for you is that gratitude turns what we have into enough. You were talking about observing all of the great things you do have in your life. Start a daily gratitude journal, noting at least 3 things that you do appreciate, and reflect on how this practice shifts your perspective over time. I'm going to give you a coaching example. Oftentimes we'll start a coaching call, what's the best thing that happened since we last spoke? And I've always been fascinated by agents that it's easy to get into the grind and you get your deals going sideways and you're mad at an agent and you got a listing yelling at you, whatever. So you ask, what's the best thing that happened since we last spoke? And how many times do they go right to something negative? When in fact, we ask, what's the best thing that happened? Oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. No, I asked, what's the best thing that happened? Give me 3 things. And in a coaching situation, you're trying to break that negativity cycle, because in real estate, you can get stuck in that for weeks or even months. And then what happens if you don't have a coach that really cares about you and gets you redirected? What happens is and we've had coaching clients come to us and they say, you know what? I've had it with real estate. I don't know why I'm in this anymore. Everybody's mean. The market's terrible. I'm stuck. I don't have any good clients. Well, it's because you're focusing on the wrong thing.
Well, like attracts like, right? So if you basically are stuck and you're surrounded by all these other people that are sort of, swimming around in the same, shit stew, basically, emotionally speaking, and you're surrounding yourself with media that's reinforcing that. And your whole entire life is basically about this continuum of negative thinking. Mm-hmm. What kind of people are you going to attract in your life as real estate clients?
It's like confirmation bias.
Jerks. That's what you're going to attract, right? Who are your friends going to be? Other, jerks. Because positive, strong-minded, optimistic people, they know how to purge the jerks in their lives. They'll sense it intuitively. And if you're, if you're stuck in a rut like that, and you're emotionally realizing this is you that we're speaking to, I gave you 2 steps a second ago where you can start the process of breaking free of all that. And the beauty of it is it doesn't really take that long, but it is going to be painful because you are going to have to go through those withdrawal symptoms. Now, if you're naturally a positive person, and you realize this is going to be your best year ever, followed by many years that are going to continuously be better than the previous year, and that's your actual approach to life, and you're essentially, you come across somebody who is, maybe it's a real estate client it's a sort of negative downward spiral, you need to make sure that you are not allowing that person to give you their little mindset venom and that's going to adversely affect yours. Because even though you have a positive mindset, to Julie's point that she just made, all it's going to take is a couple shitheads basically to get you off the track, and then all of a sudden you're going to find yourself essentially losing a day, losing a week, losing a month, losing a year, where you could have been very productive because you had some crappy experiences, in January, and all of a sudden it's June and you're still licking your wounds.
Yeah, I'm going to remember that term that you just coined, mindset venom.
Yeah.
I think that really says it, right? So beware of the mindset venom. One of the things you can do, of course, is to break the cycle with action. Engage in activities that disrupt the negative thinking. Take a walk, write in the journal, do a quick workout, reset your mind. Joan Baez said, action is the antidote to despair.
Well, Julie, let's go back to the gratitude thing, because
Sure.
there is some, I think truly it's, when you're in gratitude, and Julie and I made a decision that we're not going to hide our lights in a barrel anymore as pertains to our religiosity, so get ready. Right? So when you're in a state of gratitude, when you're having grateful thoughts or showing overt gratitude to other people, what you're doing essentially is you're tapping into God. You're tapping into your connection with God. And one of the most powerful prayers you can say is praying that you're in alignment with your soul. To be in alignment with your soul means you're in alignment with God. So when you are in a state of gratitude, in your mind at the very least, you're in alignment with basically what God is, because you're showing appreciation for all the gifts and all the beauty that constantly surrounds you. Now, that said, here's what's fascinating. I want you to right now do this exercise. Think of 3 things that you're really grateful for. The first one better be this podcast.
There, we did number 1 for you, making your lives even easier.
The second one better be because you just joined Premier Coaching. Okay. No, think of 3 things that you're really grateful for, okay? Now, those 3 things, I want you to really feel the feelings of gratitude. Maybe it's your dog. Maybe it's the car you're driving. Maybe it's the fact that you're on the treadmill and you can actually, you're kicking ass on the treadmill. Hey, by the way, you need to increase the, what's it called, Julie?
The incline.
Increase the incline, and you need to speed that shit up because you're going too slow. I can see you through your phone. All right, so be grateful for just being alive, right? So when you have that feeling of gratitude, that feeling is something divine. And notice what doesn't exist in your mind and in your heart when you're in a state of gratitude, all the negative thoughts. Isn't that amazing? Those 2 things cannot coexist in your soul, in your mind, in your heart at the same time. You cannot be in a state of gratitude while you are essentially being, a negative, having these negative sort of evil thoughts bounce around in your brain. Fascinating, isn't it? So some of you right now are listening and thinking that Julie and I are getting too hocus pocusy on you. It's making you uncomfortable. It's because you want to stay with your negative thinking. It's because it gives you a sense of security.
Well, and it's a habit.
Right, it's a habit, exactly. And like you're surrounded by other skeptics, you're surrounded by other negative thinking type folks, and all of a sudden Julie and I are confronting that and suggesting that maybe there's another way, and because you're feeling personally attacked, this is all these internal dialogue things, guys, that just spin off in very negative ways and make things worse and worse. So I'll strongly encourage you to do step 3 of our break from the negative thinking strategy here, right? The first 2 we gave to you already. The third one is experience the overwhelming sense of peacefulness that comes from thinking of 3 things. It could be 4 things. It could be 1 thing that makes you feel, in a state of gratitude. Try that, and that is our little gift from you. All right, next point, Julie.
All right, so using positive affirmations is a good way to reprogram and overcome those negative thought habits. So you can develop personal affirmations like the one I always use, I'm a doer, I do things now, I get things done. That's my anti-procrastination affirmation.
Okay, so Julie, you thought of that originally for yourself because you were a
procrastinator.
Yeah.
At least on the things that I really don't feel like doing, which is, lots of things.
And you were procrastinating it's just, let's just give a little pep talk for the procrastinators out there because it's virtually everyone.
Sure.
So you had moved past being a procrastinator because of why? You rationalized being a procrastinator. You intellectualized it.
Well, for me, and I think, everybody's a little bit different, but I do see this also amongst coaching clients, perfectionism comes in. Like, I don't want to do that task unless I can do it absolutely perfectly, or I can do it in the schedule that I want to do it in. Like, you start to develop all of these rules.
Quirks.
Quirks, right? So instead, what's the other quote? Done is better than perfect, to defeat perfectionism. So when I started saying, and you do have to say it several times, but then once you've started to reprogram yourself, you can't procrastinate anymore. I'm a doer, I do things now, I get things done. That's an action and it's a present, right? I'm not saying I'm going to get things done. I'm a doer, I do things now, I get things done. My other favorite one is, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. We've talked about that on previous podcasts where you're owning your trajectory and your success. That also can get you out of that negative mindset. So Stephen Covey said, I am not a product of my circumstances, I'm a product of my decisions. Again, owning your situation. So your action step can be to write 3 affirmations and place them somewhere on your in your line of vision, like your mirror, your desk. But more importantly, say them to yourself all the time, say them out loud, get into that better thought process and off the thought hamster wheel.
That Covey quote, you can really build on that because a lot of people are struggling with essentially not realizing that even if they have some sort of clinical diagnosis for some sort of, there's this new fad, I don't even know what else to call it, of adult autism, right? Where adults are taking these self-diagnostic tests and deciding they have some,
they're on the spectrum
they're
somewhere.
on the spectrum somehow, right?
Yeah.
And guys, I'm going to give you a little secret. Autism, it was when Julie and I were, not when we were growing up, but in the 50s and the 60s, because we were growing up primarily in the 80s, right? 70s and the 80s. And so autism used to be called childhood schizophrenia. So I'm going to tell you a little interesting thing. My Uncle Steve, he's passed away, was labeled with schizophrenia, childhood schizophrenia. Whereas in all reality, nowadays, he would have been labeled as autistic. And so what happens is, and I have someone very close to me who actually has decided that she's an adult autistic person. And why is she doing that? And she's very not stupid. She's had a lot of setbacks in her life that are essentially self-induced. And after all that, it's going to involve a lot of really painful admitting that you're responsible for your outcome and the decisions you made in the past and the life you have now. Right, introspection and owning the ramifications of your poor decision making, frankly, which most people will never do, truthfully. And so she has decided that she is going to be an adult autistic. And now what's fascinating to me is, talking with her, is she has such an amazing sense of relief. So she sent me some videos and, she's trying to educate me on what her malady is. And so I watched some of these videos and I read some of the things that she sent to me. I probably spent 2 or 3 hours on it, honestly. And because I really wanted to understand it, because I see it happening all over the place on social media. And I wanted to understand why this thing had sucked in this person, okay? Now, what I discovered was, when studying all of this, that essentially the characteristics that a lot of these people are using, that they're assigning to themselves as being adult autistics, are the same characteristics that virtually everyone I know has.
And in varying degrees, sure.
Yeah, and like the things that I watched this video of this girl who is an adult, well, she's a woman now, who is basically saying, I'm an adult autistic. And I wish the doctors and everyone else would have recognized my autism when I was a kid. And it's really rare in females, I guess. Traditionally it is. Anyway, and she started rattling off all the things that she did as a little girl. And I was thinking to myself, I don't honestly know a single, of the kids I can remember when I was a kid, all of them did this.
It's called growing up.
It's called growing up. She would, one of the characteristics was playing with your hair, sucking in your hair, twirling your hair, having intense interest in one thing and then losing interest in doing something else. It's like, that's called being a kid.
Right.
And so it's
developmental.
But it's fascinating to me how so many people, and maybe you, dear listener, are running towards these, I don't know.
Well, they're labels, right?
There's these pseudoscience type practitioners, these fake gurus, frankly. And because that's not the fascinating part. What's fascinating is how many people are getting a clear psychological sense of relief. And here's what I told this person, right? I said, look, if this is something that helps you, that makes you feel better, you just don't don't allow any doctors to give you any, drugs or anything. Make sure you're being very mindful of that. But if this is something that will make you have a sense of community and give you a sense of direction, whatever. But that isn't what she's using it for. She is using this adult, autism diagnosis that she mostly self-prescribed as her excuse to never try to improve her lot in life. She says, well, now it makes sense why basically I'm in the situation that I am. And, my life has gone the way it has because I had this undiagnosed problem.
Victim mentality.
Exactly. And now it's my rationalization for never even trying. And that's what breaks my heart.
Yes.
And that's so much of that is what's happening in society right now. Because the reality of it is, guys, all of us have our quirks and our features. All of us do. And somebody with real autism, you guys have all experienced that before. You've seen it before at airports, and maybe you have somebody with real autism in your family. That is not, people are essentially co-opting this real medical issue, and they're using it largely as an excuse. So someone's going to be mad that I said all of what I just did, but the reality of it is if you're using something like that as your excuse to essentially not make the most of your life, you're making a mistake that most likely the future version of you is going to be very disappointed that you made. You're making a decision that the person that you in 10 years are going to look back upon with regret, wishing you hadn't made that decision, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, the flip side is true. If all of a sudden you can self-diagnose yourself as having autism as an adult, and now that's going to give you some tools that are going to help you make your way through life and all the rest of it, and it maybe mentally or emotionally sets you free, and you start uplifting yourself and you start going to new levels in your life, well, I think that's great. Go for it.
It's what you do with it, right?
Exactly.
And you have a choice. It's like the turn in the road. You can, let's say that you've decided that this is what ails you, and you can explain your past, because you had this happen to you, all right? So you've self-diagnosed or maybe real diagnosed that. Now you've got a turning point. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to hit the hard reset and decide that if it's meant to be, it's up to me? Now I can move forward in spite of the fact that that happened to me, or that, I went through that? Or are you going to make that your theme song for the rest of your life? I can't because. Or maybe you can because. So that was a lot in one point, wasn't it?
Well, but Julie, I think it's really important.
But, yeah,
it is important.
You made me think of a book too. I was reading about how, kind of in the same wheelhouse, kids are being, quote, diagnosed as having anxiety because they worry about a test or something like that. And that's gotten to the point where when you're in college, you can get a special thing, which is easy to get. I think you can even get it online, that says that you need extra time for test taking, or maybe you get a 20-point swing because you have a hard time concentrating during a test. So it's kind of a slippery slope. Anxiety is normal. It's what makes you go forward in life, right?
Raise your hand right now, dear listener, and there's thousands of you listening, if you do not have or did not have anxiety prior to taking a test as a kid, right? Nowadays, you deserve a special seat and extra.
Exactly my point.
It doesn't make sense. The anxiety that you feel as a kid, that when
it's called accountability, I think.
Well, what it ultimately is something that you're supposed to push your way through, because once essentially if you have high levels of, I certainly did when I was taking tests, especially when I didn't study for them.
I don't even like taking CE.
Exactly, right? So, there it is. But you know what? Knowing that you have the anxiety as a kid, and then learning that you can actually do well push through it because you can study and maybe over prepare, and then you can win. How valuable of a lesson is that a lot of people aren't even learning today, because they're saying, oh, you have this disorder, we have to somehow give you a crutch, a mental emotional crutch. Think of the burden that person's going to carry through for the rest of their lives because they did not build the emotional, mental strength to master that particular hurdle that they had to jump over.
Absolutely. So, and we could go on, but let's go to our point number 3. And you touched on this before, environmental influences, limiting the triggers and the negative influences. So minimize exposure to negativity from people, social media, you mentioned that, situations that fuel unhelpful thoughts. Practice a media-free life as much as possible. And you can do that by curating your listening through content-specific podcasts like this one, for example. Jim Rohn said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You might say you're the average of the 5 podcasts you spend the most time with.
But don't you think that's true?
Friends.
But honestly,
absolutely.
Nowadays, I mean, that is a great, obviously it's true that you basically, the people that influence you the most are the ones you hang out with the most.
Sure.
But now if you can replace, and that's the beauty of what's happening, and I'm looking forward to doing a show with you tomorrow where we're going to sort of talk about it. It's called Open Mic, or what did we come up with? Did we come up with a name?
I've been calling it Fun Friday, but
okay,
we probably...
Fun Friday's not bad, honestly. But we're going to talk about whatever the heck interests us on Friday.
You've been warned.
You've been warned, right? But I mean, really, it is podcasts. Podcasting has given look what happened this last presidential election cycle.
Huge. Right?
Look what's happened with essentially, media's ability to control consistently the narrative. What's going to happen with essentially the future as independent, I don't even know what you want to call us, content creators are now able to have massive influence. I mean, our podcast, I told you, last year was downloaded and listened to, viewed and whatnot, consumed in essence, between 2.5 and 3 million times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge audience. It's not Joe Rogan audience. He gets one podcast, he gets 1 million downloads, right?
That's incredible.
That's incredible, right? But the truth is that we do have a large influence in our little niche, which is residential real estate agents primarily. That's where we focus.
Sure.
And so for those folks, they're listening to us on a regular basis, and we're helping to move them away from the fear and loathing that you're going to find on virtually all other forms of media. Like Julie and I are listening to All In, and that one of the predictions that one of the guys had was real estate's going to have another crap year. No, it's not.
No.
It's going to have a way better year than the last 2 years. The interest rates are going to fall. Inventory is rising. Fannie, Freddie, Mae are coming out of conservatorship. You're going to see more mortgage products. You're going to see all kinds of new construction happening, all these things. But you're not going to hear this type of stuff unless you're really curating who you're listening to and who you're allowing to influence you. And that is the beauty of what you can do with podcasting. And you can essentially sift and sort, and you can decide.
Curate it.
Right.
Yeah, and you can try things out for free. It's all
Exactly.
good. Yes, I'm sampling quite a few new things.
Me too.
I'm enjoying
Podcast,
that.
you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So your action step is to review your environment. That's what's around you, what's going in your head, etc. And identify, maybe start with one source of negativity to reduce or eliminate this week. Replace it with something uplifting. How are you starting and ending each day, for example? You may be inadvertently causing the hamster wheel of negative thoughts.
Well, that's the whole media-free thing, right?
That's right. And you kind of lock into a pattern and maybe you don't even notice it. But it can be solved easily by being more intentional with your input to your mindset, especially the beginning and the end of the day.
So I'm going to end with a couple points, Julie.
Okay.
Number one, I'll strongly encourage all of you, and Julie and I are doing this as well. Well, I'll just ask you, okay?
What's that?
So one of the commitments you made in your life is that you want to get more in alignment with your soul, and you're starting to study the Bible with more intensity.
Yes.
And you've been listening to podcasts about that. So what has happened as a result? Now you're approaching it analytically.
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, you're not approaching it spiritually.
Yeah.
So you're looking for
now.
you're looking for well, you tell your own story.
I'm looking for, I want to understand the stories of the Bible because I think that there's a lot. I'm certainly going to bring that into coaching and raising our family and our relationship. So that's one level. I like historical context. I like to see what is the true meaning of each of those stories and how can that be a practical application in life.
But what's triggered you or what's caused you over the last 12 months or maybe let's say 48 months to want to actually start focusing more on your belief in God?
I don't know if I could put that into a sentence or not.
Try.
I think that I mean, if I put that in an introspective answer, it makes me feel better.
Well, I have noticed, especially in the last
I feel more calm.
90 or 120
I
days.
don't know why that is, but it does have a calming effect. I guess it gives me a little bit of direction, understanding, more tied to my world in a sense. I don't know. I'm still working on it, obviously.
So listeners, you're hearing what she's saying, and
I'm processing it.
She's giving it, but she's giving more of an analytical, sort of scholastic answer to my
Sure.
question.
That's how I think.
So I know, I realize that. Most of them do too, right? But give a more spiritual answer. So why is it that you feel more calm? What are you feeling that you're more connected to? Your intellect or something else?
No, just like, I guess you would say God and the world and creation.
You guess you would say that?
And like my place in it.
Yeah.
And less, I think you can feel estranged from things. Especially when, and if we're being honest, the past, especially maybe last year, 2 or 3 years, we've been hit with all this negativity and all this confusion in the world. And I want to get away from that. I want to get more centered, more grounded, and see how everything is intertwined and connected.
Well, so you're becoming more in alignment with your soul.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Some people would say that's spirituality or religiosity, but I think that's the best way to put it, and more grounded with your soul and who you are and where you fit into the world.
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
and
it does have a calming effect. And I'm only, a couple weeks into it.
And you're praying and you're asking for, essentially
Direction
God
and-
be active in your life and give you a sense of direction, those types of things.
I almost feel like you're having a co-pilot in a sense, because a lot of what is, at least my little short journey, I'm listening to a podcast, which is the Bible in 365 days, or 365 podcasts, I guess. And already there's a theme of God does have a plan for you. And why would you argue with that? And to have some trust and to not be in conflict with that.
So stop right there. So that's the point of today's podcast. Because God does have a plan for everybody.
Yep.
But if everybody's allowing all these other things to co-opt God's plan,
You're fighting the plan.
and it makes them miserable.
Yeah.
So if you experience misery in your life, that's because you're not basically in alignment with the plan that God has for you.
Yeah.
And it's because a lot of people, what they do, so there's something innate in all of us that requires that we have There's like, I don't know how to describe it. I always visualize it when I'm trying to explain this to myself even. Like I see a big a bookshelf full of encyclopedias, and there's a certain section in that bookshelf if you do not have if you're not essentially a believer in God, those books are missing. And so you're missing this entire, let's call it the G section from the encyclopedias. They're all gone. And so you don't ever have a complete set of encyclopedias.
That's a good way of putting it.
And so what happens is people will fill that section of the missing encyclopedias with other things.
Because you're still searching for it.
Because you cannot, we're designed to have some connection with God. And if you don't have an overt connection with God, you will connect with other things as a substitute for God, which means you're not in alignment with your soul. And that causes you to have misery. Now, again, some of you aren't going to like what we're saying, and that's okay. Just listen to us anyway, because I want you to know where we're coming from. And what has happened, and certainly this isn't just in the last 4 years, but it's happened, people will then substitute it for big government. People will say, they're like, I don't believe, like you'll have people say, I don't believe in God, or all the rest of it. And they almost have this arrogant, like dismissive approach to people who have faith. Like, how can you believe in some big daddy in the sky? I heard people say stuff like that. And then you talk to them, and it's like, well, what do you believe in? Well, I have this degree, that degree, and I believe in the people in the white coats, and I believe in big government, and I believe in all these things. So what you've essentially done is you've replaced your need for a spiritual connection with being part of that tribe of the big government, sort of the, I think modern aristocratic approach to society, right? Some people have replaced it with materialism. Other people have replaced it with narcissism. So, other people have replaced, but what's going to happen ultimately, and I think this is what's happening in society, and I think you're representative of that, maybe unconsciously, maybe the unconscious,
probably
is something that's taking over society. I certainly see it and feel it. Is that people are realizing all those false prophets have been nothing other than life-destroying, soul-crushing, fake gods.
Well, it's been exorcised.
You're right. It's being removed.
And it was let out of the gates long enough and tested long enough. And now there were enough examples where that was not the right path.
Look at
that we're coming back to center it.
Look at masking, right? When I had some funny
for tomorrow's show.
I had some funny experiences with masking when we drove all over the country in 2021, especially when we were in San Francisco.
Yep.
And the whole masking and the big science and the rest of it.
It's a religion.
It had become a religion. And you guys have all just realized what we're saying. So we are trying to bend your thinking to be more in alignment with God, because you will be happier then.
It's good for you.
But just as you've listened to what we've said, and we're not, Julie and I are not, preachers or pastors or rabbis or, monks. What we are people just like you that are working our way through it, that are feeling a sense of calm and relief and massive gratitude, because there is definitely something that's changed in society. And I don't think it has much truthfully to do, though it does have something to do with the new regime running Washington, D.C. It's what Julie said. People have had enough of all these, essentially these tribal instincts and these fake dichotomies that we're sort of manifesting in our lives and our society in different ways. People are just sick of it. And you can see how people voted. People that would have previously voted for the Democrats said, you all went too far, and I'm going to vote. Now, that is something that's never really happened in our society, in our country before. Essentially, especially for someone as divisive as the president, right? The new president. That's the truth. But people have had enough of it. Where does that come from? Where does that lead to? What's next after that? Well, obviously, in our opinion, it's going to be people being overt with their desire to be connected with God, because they still have that chasm in their minds and they want to have a full set of encyclopedias, right? That's the visualization I use. And when they put the connection with God and they fill that chasm, that's what's going to ultimately basically make them so that they feel like complete people. And then you start achieving on a higher level, and it's very difficult to get you to be dissuaded to go down any of these sort of negative mindset journeys again. So hopefully you guys pulled a lot from this, and it's benefiting you in multiple different ways. And so tomorrow's show, get ready. It's open mic, anything goes.
Anything goes.
It's going to be wackadoodle.
They'll find out.
Julie, so I'll tell you how we set it up. So Julie and I obviously have a lot of interests outside of real estate. This we have to do to keep our brains, frosty. We're
doing what we talked about today.
We're doing our best to be polymaths, right? And so Julie and I are finding articles and podcasts and different little tidbits of things that we feel will frankly entertain each other as we present it to all of you, because we know if we're making each other laugh, we're going to make you guys laugh too. Hopefully.
I'm sure we'll get feedback.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, we're going to do that show tomorrow, and that's going to be it's going to be our Friday show where we get to talk about whatever we want to talk about. In the meantime, thank you for being part of our lives. We look forward to continued involvement in all of your lives. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.